It's 2001. Science fiction has long been counting down to this date, and now it's here. So what happens next? We were meant to be in outer space by now, rocketing towards our destiny in the stars. This evolutionary leap was predicted with the scenes of the Star Child floating back to Earth in the landmark film 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's over 50 years since the publication of the story that inspired the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. So what did it get right, and what did it get wrong? And in 50 years' time, what will your science fiction be like? Probably rather weird.
You don't know the half of it, mate. I am the Star Child, and I am coming to Earth, bringing with me the future of British science fiction. So I bet you're wondering, will that future be in the inner spaces of genetics and artificial intelligence, or will it be in outer space? 20 years from now, will you be sitting in a spaceship with Strauss on your Walkman? In 2001, space travel is as routine as air travel, but considerably more graceful. This ballet of the spaceships is central to Kubrick's vision of a gleaming utopia in the stars.
2001 is a really important movie.
I think that 2001 is what science fiction should be about.
And it was conceptually just mind-blowing. It was about human evolution and about knowledge.
It's about the fate of human beings. And so few science fiction movies are about that. They're about such smaller things, more mundane things.
It was the first time that a science fiction movie kind of had art filmic codes embedded into it. So all of a sudden, people who lived in Hampstead had a license to take a science fiction movie seriously.
2001, actually, yeah, it is still quite a futuristic look. It's very canny because unlike most futuristic films, it doesn't look dated.
It all began with a story by the godhead of British science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke. American director Stanley Kubrick read it and worked with Clarke to create 2001. 2001 is a collaboration between British and American science fiction, drawing on the best qualities of both traditions to create a masterpiece. But how accurate a prediction was it? Kubrick and Clarke got the physics of space travel spot on. This is how you dock a spaceship with a space station. What they got wrong, though, was there was no future in outer space.
I kind of miss the monorails and the hover cars and yeah, the round trips to the moon for the weekend we were all promised.
About 20 years ago, we saw travelling into outer space as perhaps being one of the most glamorous, exciting things that could happen. Then people landed on the moon and so on, and it became maybe not so glamorous. Even then in 2001, the view very much was the frontiers are out there for humans. It's outer space where the excitement is.
But we have turned our back on the final frontier. The combination of the Challenger disaster and space travel's inability to deliver profit means that we will never fulfill our childhood dream of being astronauts.
I am disappointed about space travel, I must say. I mean, I grew up, you know, one of the first things I can remember was watching the first moon landing and thinking, yeah, cool, we will be going on away days to the moon. Of course, with, you know, the things that's happened with British Rail and so forth, it's not necessarily a great idea because, you know, the wrong type of snow is one thing, the wrong type of death, hideous nightmare void is even worse. I'm sure as hell not getting in a spaceship until I'm absolutely sure it's going to work, and the first ones won't.
In 2001, space is the place. It predicts that our destiny as a species is to evolve to the point where we will explore the universe. Our evolution is triggered by the famous monoliths. These inscrutable devices are alien markers. Each time man discovers one, like this monolith on the moon, it shows how well our evolution is coming along. But instead of getting a pat on the head, we are subject to a high-pitched whine.
You pitiful apes have given up on space travel. But one man who keeps the dream alive is best-selling author Ian M. Banks, with his tales of intelligent giant starships.
I suppose if you're going to sort of be really sort of anarchish about it in a way, you'd say that the culture is actually much more advanced in the Federation because it's got a lot more ships. Ships are as common as, you know, cars are in our society, if not more, and it's vastly bigger and more distributed throughout the entire galaxy, and you don't have the different quadrants and, you know, Voyager trying to get back from the back of beyond and all the rest of it. There's no back of beyond in the galaxy as far as the culture. Well, there's lots of little backs of beyonds, but there's no further that's, you know, completely out with the pale. Well, apart from Andromeda, obviously, you know.
Thank you. You are cleared through voice print identification.
Both 2001 and The Culture are utopias, but of a very different stripe. Kubrick's future is a gleaming, cold and mechanical one, whereas The Culture is a chaotic playground of drugs, weird sex and anarchy.
It's basically a great place to live, you know, because people occasionally say, would you really like to live in the culture? I can't understand the question. Of course, you know, so would you idiot. You know, it's just a great place to live because you don't have to do any work and you can live as long as you like and have lots of sex and lots of drugs and rock and roll. I mean, really, that's basically your and good food, obviously.
The Culture comes out of the hedonism of the 90s. Another Scottish writer exploring the mind-expanding properties of drugs and science fiction is Grant Morrison. His comic, The Invisibles, comes out of that decade's rave culture. Grant Morrison dabbles in magic, not in a rabbits out of a hat sense, but in the summoning demons, gods, or indeed John Lennon and chatting to them sense.
You can use anything that has power for you. So if you're into Superman, you can conjure Superman. I've done John Lennon, or I've done...
You've conjured John Lennon?
Yeah, yeah.
What was that like?
It was John Lennon. I mean, what I did was I dressed up in a paisley shirt and Beatle boots and trousers, and I got big pictures of John Lennon. And soon enough, I get a huge musical head of Lennon appearing, who then gives me a song which I've got recorded in there, which sounds just like a John Lennon song. During the 90s I was doing a lot of E, and I think I was living that life, and it kind of, a lot of it, well, I mean, I hope that not all of it was, because I tried to put everything in there. I tried to put weird philosophies in, or experiences that I'd just had. The conspiracy thing was becoming the central myth of the 90s. The whole idea, everyone was being abducted. I had abduction experiences, friends had abduction experiences.
The Invisibles is set in the last years of the 90s. A group of countercultural revolutionaries, including a Scouser and a tranny, are fighting against the shadowy forces behind every conspiracy theory whispered in the chill-out rooms of raves.
The Invisibles operate in small cells, and this particular cell is controlled by the charismatic King Mob character. You know, King Mob was some part fantasy self, part figure who was starting to appear. I mean, the anarchist with the bald head and the trench coat returned. You know, it was even in James Bond in the last movie where Robert Carlyle's suddenly this King Mob-like anarchist. So he was cool, you know, it was the idea of suddenly the glamorous anarchist instead of the dull, woolly anarchist. And then you did, you know, the Jack Frost character, who's the little Scouse boy who's suddenly learning he's got the power to control all of reality if he focuses his will properly. And, you know, he was great to write because he said fuck all the time. Well, Lord Fanny, transvestite guy, there was another just classic 90s archetype. Where did they come from? And yet suddenly they were everywhere, from RuPaul to whoever, you know. This persistent idea I had that a transvestite witch would make a great character. And this seemed suddenly like a brilliant image to use and update into this total glam, full-on pop fashion tranny thing. And if you can imagine everything you read in the Sunday Sport, everything you read in the National Enquirer, every weird rumour on the internet, every David Icke story is true. We do live in a world where the royals are secret extraterrestrials. We do live in a world where, you know, weird cabals control the entire globe and manipulate it according to their own ends. And it was just me trying to create a myth and a diary of the 90s as I was living through it.
Next on SF UK, we delve further into 2001's most chilling prediction, the insane artificial intelligence of HAL 9000.
What will happen when you apes invent artificial intelligence? Your British science fiction predicts two outcomes. Either these self-aware supercomputers will be your servants, or their superior intellects will lead them to grow bored of you, like my murderous co-star in 2001, HAL 9000.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made.
HAL 9000 is the onboard artificially intelligent computer in 2001: A Space Odyssey. His job is to look after the astronauts as they head out to Jupiter to investigate the mysterious monolith. Now, HAL was played by a Canadian actor called Douglas Rain, and it's an incredible performance. Rain supplies a voice that is both calm, yet increasingly passive-aggressive. In fact, it reminds me of a shrink. It has that tone of, I know everything, but I'm listening to you anyway. And like a shrink, HAL goes, eventually, insane.
Kubrick and Clarke got one thing right. Computers do crash in 2001. The supposedly infallible HAL 9000 goes belly up with terrifying consequences for the astronauts.
I think HAL, similarly to the Terminator, looked at a situation where machines could, if you like, make a decision for themselves, and the decision was, well, we want to do what we want to do. We don't want humans bothering us, messing around. We have the upper hand. I think that's not too far away from what we could actually have happening, that intelligent robots, perhaps more a networked intelligence, can make decisions that we simply can't compete with.
I think HAL was not a bad early take on artificial intelligence in the sense that it showed its potential unreliability. I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things coming towards us in terms of artificial intelligence. The fact that it's becoming more complex, the fact that it's becoming more inexplicable.
I thought HAL was a really interesting creation. I remember reading something by Arthur C. Clarke about how he got a lot of flack for having a computer behave the way it did, because of the Asimov model that computers and robots would be subservient. And Arthur C. Clarke made a very interesting point, which is that the most sophisticated computers we have now are built to run defense systems. They're about the destruction of people. They're not about preserving human life.
When the time comes for HAL to be killed off, astronaut Dave Bowman wanders through his mind, removing it piece by piece, so inspiring HAL's final, terrible soliloquy.
My mind is going.
HAL's death is strangely moving. At the end, the computer is afraid and very human. Computers having emotions is not totally unrealistic, although the only emotion most modern computers exhibit is spite.
My mind is going.
I remember sitting in a rave in the early 90s. Some scamp had sampled HAL's final words and scattered them over a furious trance track.
Dave, star, star, star. Dave.
British science fiction has moved from exploring outer space to investigating inner space.
Dave.
Like the virtual landscapes of the mind, the internet, the quantum events happening in our DNA. We look at the future not with a telescope, but with a microscope.
A lot of the science fiction in the 50s and 60s was concerned with outer space, with going out there and conquering places. I mean, obviously, it's been observed many times before that a lot of that was to do with people's fear about the Cold War, about the threats from without, and so, that's why a lot of that came about. That seems to be something we're slightly less concerned about now, and in almost a rather sort of egocentric way, we're turning ourselves inwards. We're looking at ourselves as individuals. And I think part of that is because so many of the new technologies which are coming about now are things like the internet, which are joining individuals together, are things like the Human Genome Project, which will enable us to tinker with ourselves at quite a basic level, are things like cloning, which cause us to ask questions about identity and about the rights of certain people to do certain things.
Michael Marshall Smith's Spares explores the disturbing consequences of cloning, one of the key ideas of inner space science fiction.
Yeah, the idea behind Spares was basically that in the not-too-distant future, very wealthy parents could take out what I guess you could see as sort of the ultimate life insurance for a child. Upon conception, the embryo would be cloned or copied. That copy would then be taken off to a facility and then grown in tandem with the real child over the years and decades. And if anything happened to the, quote, real child, if they were injured or got a disease or something, then basically doctors would go to the facility, take what they needed from the copy, be it an organ, some skin, an eye, whatever was needed, and then sort of in effect sew it into the real child.
Imagine it. One of these babies will grow up to be a spoilt brat who can live as irresponsibly as he likes, safe in the knowledge that he can always be patched up by hacking a limb, an eye, or a patch of skin from one of his identical twins. Science fiction has always played with predicting the future, but now the future is no longer a far and distant country. The acceleration of science means that we're catching up with it. We're living on the edge of science fiction.
I wasn't trying to be predictive. I was simply saying, here's an idea. I thought, here's a way in which that technology might be used by people as they are now. Literally 2 months after I'd finished the book, bang, Dolly the much vaunted sheep appeared on the horizon. And since then, it's been constantly in the news. But I had no way of predicting at that stage that it was going to be such a sort of current topic.
Cloning is one type of inner space science fiction. Another is the micro-events that occur in computers. Events that are already catching up with the wilder predictions of science fiction, like the work of Kevin Warwick, Professor of Cybernetics at Reading University, who intends to become a human cyborg.
In the fall of 1998, I had the first of my implants. That was surgically put in position in my left arm. The next implant is scheduled for September 2001, this year. And that one's a lot more serious. That involves a connection directly onto the nervous fibres in my arm. The greatest danger is when we start sending signals in which will go directly to the brain. You're not really sure how the brain is going to cope. Maybe the brain will do fine and great, we can take this, we can take that. But maybe not. Maybe the brain will switch down and say, oh no, I can't cope with this.
Kevin Warwick believes that man has to evolve into a cyborg if he is to survive the coming of the artificially intelligent computers. Although why we can't just pull the plug on them has never been adequately explained to me.
Some people might say if you have a heart pacemaker or a cochlear implant, even artificial hips, then you are in fact a cyborg, part human, part technology. In fact, the definition in Terminator is exactly that. But to me, a cyborg is something more. It's somebody where they have enhanced capabilities because of the link with technology. And really, that's where I'm going. I'm going to be the first enhanced cyborg when I have my implant connected onto the nervous system. One exciting part of our next experiment is my wife, Irena, is also going to receive an implant. So she will be Mr. and Mrs. Cyborg, if you like. And the implants then we're going to use to send signals from one person's nervous system directly across under the other person's nervous system. So let's say Irena is looking at an attractive young guy down the street, getting quite excited. I will feel some of that excitement. But it's even better if you think we're actually having sex together and we have our implants connected. So if I say to her, how is that for you? Is that okay? And she says to me, yeah, that's great, that's great. but I can actually feel it's not really that great for her. I question it. Flipping it the other way, maybe I can feel, yeah, what I'm doing now is really exciting her. Maybe I can do more. Maybe I can. So just by direct feeling, really, we can have a sexual experience that's never been felt before.
– 2001 famously opens with apes who are taught by a monolith how to use a bone as a weapon. The message is that man is being guided on his evolution from ape to astronaut, a change succinctly expressed in this jump cut from flying bone to falling weapon satellite.
So how will British science fiction evolve in the 21st century? Right now I am drifting toward Earth, where I intend to build a new science fiction paradise, a new world of ideas, a new Jerusalem.